being a human being is not easy as opposed to an animal because we're born and nobody gives us like a direction. Our parents might be a little bit, our college, teachers, etc., mentors, but generally we're on our own. And it's a very, very difficult process. You wake up in the morning and you don't really know what you can do. You could choose 12 different paths. It can be very confusing and very overwhelming. When you find that sense of purpose, when you find what I call your life's task, everything has a direction. Everything has a purpose. Your energy is concentrated. It's not like you're just going down a single narrow pathway. It's not like life becomes boring and it's just about discipline and solving problems. It's actually the most exciting thing that can ever happen to you because you never have that lost feeling. You wake up in the morning and you go, yeah, this is what I need to accomplish. People come at you with all kinds of distractions and boring and irritating things. You're able to cut it out. It's just the most marvelous piece of internal radar that you can have. So I genuinely wish that everybody can find that kind of internal radar. And so it's not easy, and I understand that. There's no like instant formula because we're all about instant formulas. It's difficult, and I want you to know that. So it's not like Robert can give me the answer in 3 minutes. No, I can't. But there's a process involved. It's not, a mystery. You can follow a very singular process. And the idea is, you're talking about childhood. The way I like to frame it is, when you were born, you are a phenomenon. You are unique. Your DNA has never occurred in the history of the universe, going back billions of years. It will never occur in the future. Your life experience with your parents and everything that you experience in your early years going on up is unique. It's yours. You're one of a kind, right? So that is your source of power. To waste that is just the worst thing you can do in your life. And what the power is finding that uniqueness, what makes you you, and how you can mine that, and how you can go deep into it and use that to create a career path, right? And so I tell people when you're a child, when you're 4 or 5, or even younger, you have what the great psychologist Maslow called impulse voices. They're little voices in your head that say, I love this, I hate that. I like this food, I don't like when mommy moves this way, I like when daddy comes from here. You're very cued into who you are and what you like and what you don't like. And these voices kind of direct you in certain ways, right? And when you're very young, they direct you towards intellectual, mental pursuits as well. And there's a book I recommend for everybody. It's Howard Gardner's 5 Frames of Mind. It's helped me immensely. The idea is he talks about 5 forms of intelligence. Our problem is we think of intelligence as mostly intellectual, but there are many forms of intelligence. There's the intelligence that has to do with words. There's abstract intelligence that has to do with patterns and mathematics. There's kinetic intelligence that has to do with the body. There's social intelligence. He has 5 of them. And the idea is your brain naturally veers towards one of them. It can veer towards 2 of them, that happens, but generally one of them kind of dominates, right? And it's like a grain in your brain that's going in a certain direction. You want to go with that grain, and because that's where your power will lie. So when you're young, if you go back and think about when you were 4 or 5, you can maybe get a picture of some kind of direction or voice inside of you that was impelling you towards this. I know for me, it was words. I can remember when I was 6 years old, I was just obsessed with words, just the letters in words. Almost like in this almost slightly schizophrenic way. I would spell words backwards. I would take them apart. I would do anagrams. I love palindromes, right? So I had a thing about words and language. It's very primal. Some people, Albert Einstein, when he was 4 years old, his father gave him a birthday gift of a compass. And he was just mesmerized by this compass. The idea that there are invisible forces out there in the cosmos moving this needle. And he's obsessed with the idea of invisible forces. Steve Jobs, when he was like 7 or 8 or maybe younger in Burlingame, California, his father, they passed by a store with technological devices in the window. And he was just hypnotized by the design of those devices and the glass tubes and everything. So he wanted to go in that direction. Tiger Woods saw his father hitting golf balls in the garage, and he was just like screaming with joy. He had to do that, right? I can give you a million different examples of this. Of course, these are people who are famous, obviously. We can go back and find that. It's easier. But what happens to you, and please cut me off if I'm going on too long
No,
here.
please continue.
Okay.
Please.
What happens to you is you're 7, now you're getting older, and you're starting to not hear that voice anymore. You're hearing the voice of your teachers telling you, you're not good at this field. You need to get better at math. You shouldn't be interested in these sports or anything. You should be going this way. Your parents are starting to tell you this is the career they want for you, or the direction they want you to go in, right? You start hearing that more than your own voice. And as you get older, it gets worse and worse and worse. Then when you're a teenager, it's all about what other people are doing, your peers, what's cool, what's not cool, And that kind of is more, so all of this noise enters your brain and you can't hear that anymore. You don't know who you are. And so you go to college, you kind of maybe choose a major that seems practical that your parents want you to go into. Maybe you kind of wander around, you're not sure. And then you enter the work world without that inner radar that I'm talking about. And brother, you're lost, right? Where should I go? Well, I need to make money, right? And so you make a choice based on the need to make a lot of money. Not everyone, but some people do that. And I understand that need. We all need to make a living, but that can set you off on a very bad path because you're not connected emotionally. The thing is, when you figure out that primal inclination, that grain that's inside of you, then you have the energy to be disciplined, to go through boring tasks, to learn. You learn at a faster rate because you're emotionally engaged. When you're emotionally engaged in a subject, the brain learns 2x, 3x, 4x as fast as when you're not. I always give the example. In college, I studied foreign languages, which was kind of a passion of mine. For 3 or 4 years, I studied French, and then I went to Paris, and I couldn't speak a word. It was useless because it didn't teach me anything practical, right? I was totally confused. But I was in Paris, and I loved it, and I wanted to live there, right? And I had a girlfriend, and I needed to speak French to her. And I can tell you, in 1 month, I learned more than those 4 years of university because I wanted to, because I was engaged. My emotions were there. It was like I had to survive to learn French. So most of us, we don't have a need really to learn this subject. We're paying half attention. But when you find that thing that really connects to you, you're paying deep attention. Your emotions are engaged. You're learning at a much faster rate, okay? And so the thing is, how do you find that when you're older? When you're 21, I give people a lot of help, and it's usually not so difficult. We can go through that process. It gets harder when you're 30 and you've been wandering around, but it's not impossible. I didn't really find my exact path until I was 38, 39, to be honest. So there's hope. When you get 40 and you get 50, it gets more and more difficult, right? And it's very sad if you wasted that seed of uniqueness that I'm talking about. And I tell people there are ways of going back, and we go through a process like archaeology. We have to dig and dig and dig and find those bones from your childhood that indicated what you were meant to do. But when you find your life's task, everything opens up. It doesn't mean you figured out, okay, I've got to aim for this particular job when I'm 28. That's not how it works. It gives you a sense of direction. You can try different things. You can experiment. You can have fun when you're in your 20s. You're going to learn skills. But it gives you an overall framework instead of, whoa, all of this confusion, this chaos, social media, the internet, I could go here, here, here. You're lost at sea. It gives you a very important sense of direction, a compass.
As you describe this, I have this image of, you mentioned animals that presumably don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of the niches they can exist in. But the way I imagine this process is that as a human, we're plopped into a environment, and here I'm using analogy, where we don't really know if we are an aquatic animal, a terrestrial animal, or an avian, right?
Or an amphibian.
Or an amphibian, for that matter. And to make the wrong choice, right? To be an amphibian who's trying to fly, although I'm sure they're out there in the animal kingdom, it's not just a waste of time. It's probably deadly.
Yeah.
And not to over-dramatize the failure of finding one's purpose, but I see it that way. Whereas perhaps we could just say that the process of finding one's purpose is to realize like, I'm an amphibian. I can go in and out of water, whereas a bunch of other creatures around me stop at the water's edge.
Right.
Right. And this is really cool. And a bunch of these other things, like these flying things, that they can't actually even go in the water.
Right.
Some of them might, be on the surface or dive into it, but they can't do what I can do. So the process of self-discovery, it sounds like, is about restricting one's choices to a sort of wedge within the full landscape of options. And, for me, I can certainly recall, after reading Mastery, it helped me recall some early seed emotions that I experienced as a very distinct sensation in my body.
Can you describe that?
Yeah. Well, without making it too specific to my unique tastes, as a kid, I loved flora and fauna. I loved learning about biology.
Sure.
Again, no surprise there. But animals and how they move in particular, and fish, and going to a proper aquarium store for the first time for me, and going snorkeling for the first time was like, wow. And even as I describe it, it's almost like my body floats. I feel it in my left arm of all things. And it feels like there's something to do about it. It's not just that I'm in observation of things that delight me.
Right.
It's like there's an activation state created within me. Like, I got to do something with this. And typically it's tell everybody about it until they won't listen anymore. But oftentimes it's to also draw those things, to think about them, and I just delight in them. It's a constant source of delight. And so seeds such as those, and there are a few other things in that landscape of flora and fauna, and learning about animals and biology, including the human animal, and then organizing information feels so satisfying to me. It's like a drug that, and so it just feels like this, eternal spring of life, right? And so for me, that's what it was. And in 2015, when I was teaching that course, the course I loved, but I was feeling a little bit astray in my scientific career. And then I read Mastery, and I realized, yes, I love running a laboratory, I love teaching, but there's something else for me, and it has to do not with a podcast. I didn't even know what a podcast. I knew what a podcast was. I was listening to podcasts at that time, but I wasn't on social media. I had no thoughts of having a podcast. But what I wanted was that feeling in its total number of forms. Right. That's the goal. Get that feeling in as many forms as possible.
Right.
Is that about?
That's absolutely perfect, because the connection to what I'm talking about, it's not an intellectual thing. It's visceral. It's emotional. It's physical, right? And you feel it in your body. And when you're doing it, it's like it's at your level. It's like you're swimming with the current. You feel it. Things are easy. Everything clicks together. There's a delight. Not everything is going to be delightful. There's going to be tedium involved. There's going to be moments of boredom. But you're able to withstand the moments of boredom because you feel that deep overall connection. So yes, that's precisely what I'm talking about. I mean, for me, it's a little bit a similar thing. Is I said about words, but the other thing that I was obsessed with when I was a kid was early human ancestors. Don't ask me why. I just was so obsessed with our ancestors millions of years ago, and how it's possible to be living here in the 60s or 70s with cars and everything, but to come to where we are now. And I wrote a short story when I was 8 years old about a vulture. It was written from the point of view of a vulture watching the first humans kind of emerge on the planet. I'm sure it was absolutely awful, dreadful. But the weird thing is, I'm writing a new book, and all I'm doing in that book is going into early humans. And I feel like a kid again. I'm so excited. I'm so happy. So I can very much relate to your story.
You mentioned these 5 different forms of intelligence, or frames of mind, as you referred to them. And I'm certainly aware that I lean towards a more intellectual interest, although, as you pointed out, the excitement, the delight is visceral.
Yeah.
And the actions are actions. They're of the body, ultimately.
Right.
One has to draw, speak, write books, et cetera, to transmute that excitement into something real. For people that are not as intellectually tuned, but maybe are kinesthetically tuned, for instance, I can only wonder what that's like. I'm not completely uncoordinated, but I don't think I have a kinesthetic attunement or frame of mind. But I've, for instance, had a podcast listener mention that they think in feels, that they literally experience thought as as sort of a patchwork of bodily sensations.
Right.
And that thought for them is not of the stuff from the neck up, but only from the neck down, which to me was really intriguing. And so I only raise this because there have to be as you point out, there's an infinite number of different sort of orientations based on our unique DNA and experience. But what do you think explains why these particular seeds, or as you point out, like the direction that the grain runs in the brain? I mean, it's partially going to be nature, it's going to be DNA,
For sure.
but we're talking about this as if there's some exciting or awe-inspiring or delightful thing that captures us. Can it be the other way too? Can it be, one has a bad experience as a child in an intellectual environment and then decides, I'm going in things of the body feel good, things of the mind, of intellect feels bad. And does it matter whether or not we are drawn to our purpose by recognizing what we love or what we hate, or are both useful?
Oh, they're both very, very useful. A lot of intelligence is nonverbal. We think in terms of images. We're very much infected by the emotions of other people. So I know, for instance, my mother is very, very interested in history. She's obsessed with history. And I probably absorbed her interest in history. I don't think there's a gene for that interest, So you're going to absorb things from your parents as well. So it's not all just genetic. But yeah, what you hate will will have a big thing. But the problem with doing that is, if you go into a direction and you're in elementary school, et cetera, and they force you to learn math and you hate it, what it tends to do is it turns you off from learning in general. You think, I don't want to be disciplined. I don't want to go through anything because it's painful. It doesn't lead anywhere. It's not me. It's frustration. It turns you off from learning in general. So it's really, really important for a child to have the love experience as early as possible so that they can know what they hate and why they hate it, right? And then they can rebel and they can go into that field, as opposed to, I hate learning, I hate discipline, I hate studying, I hate trying things over and over again. If you're kinesthetically oriented, and a part of me, I understand that because I love sports, is you have to practice. It's going to take a lot of, you're not going to instantly be good at something, right? And that's going to require a love of it, right? But if your math experience, because I hate learning shit, it's going to transfer to sports. You're going to hate discipline in general. So it's very important for parents to let that child have at least glimmers of that love moment. I know for me, when I finished college and I entered the work world, I had to get a job. I worked in journalism. I hated it. I hated working for other people. I hated office politics. I hated all the egos. I hated the smarminess. I hated the lack of quality. It was all just about, making money and getting things out there. And then I worked in Hollywood. I hated Hollywood. I hated working in Hollywood. That formed me very much, made me go in the direction that I went in, but only from the basis of I knew that I wanted to be a writer. So, that's very important, that it's not just hate. It can form you, but there also has to be that positive, deep emotional love of something that also is grounded in you in some way.
Yeah, what you just said really highlights the fact that energy and motivation can come from either pressure, desire for something or desire to get away from something.
Right.
And earlier when you were talking about how we are so much more engaged and driven towards things that stir us emotionally, and actually we know, based on the neuroscience, as you know too, I'm sure, that only by the release of certain neurochemicals in the brain and body would our brain have any reason to change, right? If you don't feel agitation and you can do everything that you're trying to do, of course your brain wouldn't change. Like, why would it, right? That agitation is a signature of the neurochemicals that are saying, hey, something's different now.
Right.
You might need to do something different, including rewire yourself, right? And that can come from positive or negative experiences.
Of course.
Now, I'm obsessed with this idea of energy. I mean, we all want to have more energy and focus. And normally we hear about the concept of energy in the context of caloric energy, like what should we eat and when and how much, and we need to get sleep. But what you're really referring to is neural energy, like the engagement of ourselves that's, sitting there ready to be engaged, but it requires the right experiential macronutrients, right? The experiential micronutrients, as opposed to, of course, we need good nutrition, but that's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So would you say that when we are, let's say, since a good number of our listeners are in adulthood, from our 20s on, that the things that excite us as adults that really generate some feeling of readiness or grab our attention are still informative toward guiding our decisions about best life and life purpose?
Well, what exactly do you mean by that? I mean, because there are things that excite you in a kind of a quick way, where you have to relieve some tension, and there's entertainment, and there's things that kind of give you pretty immediate gratification. And there's the larger picture of something that will give you fulfillment over years to come. So you can feel that when you're older and you can pay attention to it. But a lot of the time we're paying too much attention to the immediate pleasures of life, to what gives us instant gratification, and that's what we're grabbing for. So this is a much more kind of deeper process that involves that digging that I was saying. It's deeper than just kind of, I like this, I don't like that, kind of thing. It's more something macro than just that. And so when you're in your 20s or in your 30s or your 40s, you want to be paying attention to yourself. And the problem with people in the world today is you're not paying attention to yourself. You're not inside your own head. You don't hear those voices. You don't hear what you love, what you like anymore, because as I said, there's so many of these other distractions going on. And so you're always attuned to what other people like, right? Because you're in social media. This is what people are following. This is what they're interested in. As opposed to disengaging, backing off from that and looking at yourself and going through the process of, that's not me. Actually, I don't really like that, And so what you're talking about is, I think, very profound, is levels of frustration or anxiety are definite signals that you must pay attention to, that they're telling you this isn't a good direction for you. This is a waste of time for you. And in general, I tell people, self-awareness, being able to hear those voices, to understand that your frustration is telling you something. And sometimes you just act on it without understanding it. But understanding why you're frustrated, why you don't like your career, why you're not happy about where you're going is the key to everything. It will open up, it will actually be able, even in your 30s, to return you to that childhood inclination. But if you can't listen to where those emotions come from, then they're useless. They're not teaching you anything.
As we all know, quality nutrition influences, of course, our physical health, but also our mental health and our cognitive functioning, our memory, our ability to learn new things and to focus. And we know that one of the most important features of high quality nutrition is making sure that we get enough vitamins and minerals from high quality, unprocessed or minimally processed sources, as well as enough probiotics and prebiotics and fiber to support basically all the cellular functions in our body, including the gut microbiome. Now, I, like most everybody, try to get optimal nutrition from whole foods, ideally mostly from minimally processed or non-processed foods. However, one of the challenges that I and so many other people face is getting enough servings of high-quality fruits and vegetables per day, as well as fiber and probiotics that often accompany those fruits and vegetables. That's why way back in 2012, long before I ever had a podcast, I started drinking AG1. And so I'm delighted that AG1 is sponsoring the Huberman Lab podcast. The reason I started taking AG1 and the reason I still drink AG1 once or twice a day is that it provides all of my foundational nutritional needs. That is, it provides insurance that I get the proper amounts of those vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and fiber to ensure optimal mental health, physical health, and performance. If you'd like to try AG1, you can go to drinkag1.com/Huberman to claim a special offer. They're giving away 5 free travel packs plus a year's supply of vitamin D3 K2. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Huberman to claim that special offer. So it sounds like one of the goals is to engage in what I'll just call for the moment unadulterated self-referencing. Unadulterated in the all senses of the word, because as a child, as you point out, at stages of life that are before puberty, they're literally pre-sexual, which I think is important, right? Because puberty, to me, as a neurobiologist who started off as a developmental neurobiologist, I can tell you that puberty is the most profound transformation that the brain undergoes
Oh, for sure.
in the entire lifespan. There's just absolutely no question about it. Everything is different after puberty because of all of the new relational dynamics that become apparent and our potential involvement in them.
Yeah.
It's not talked about enough how dramatically puberty changes the brain.
Sure.
I mean, we are different people before and after
All the
puberty.
hormones that are suddenly raging.
The hormones are there, and it's not just changes in how we view the world, but changes in how the world views us.
Yeah.
And not just through the lens of sexuality, but also expectation of what we are capable of, what we are responsible for or not responsible for, our learning capacity. I mean, puberty is like this, it's also the most rapid stage of aging in our entire lifespan.
Wow, I didn't
Those
know
kids
that.
that go home for the summer and then come back, like shaving,
Yeah.
I was sort of I wasn't a late bloomer, but I had a long protracted puberty, but I remember those kids. I'm sure we all remember those kids. Everything changes. And so I think prior to puberty, these seeds, as you've described them, of delight or of resistance to things, I think they are unadulterated. They're not contaminated
Right.
by the voices and expectations of others. And so I can see the challenge of reaching back to those as an adult. I wonder if this relates to something that I've heard you talk about before, although perhaps not as much as some of the other topics you've discussed publicly, which is the real versus the false sublime.
Oh.
Could you perhaps just define for us what sublime really is, what a sublime experience is, and the distinction between real and false
Wow.
sublime experiences? Because I feel like this relates to
really?
finding that seed, right? It's about finding authentic seeds within us, as opposed to when emotions can be distracting and misleading.
Wow. I never made that connection. And it's the book that I'm writing right now. So thank you for that. I have to think about that. I'm writing a book on the sublime. And I have several ways of kind of illustrating. I generally like to use a metaphor. And the metaphor is that being a human being, being a social human being living in a particular culture, means that you live inside of a circle. And that circle of that time are the conventions of thinking, of ideas that are acceptable, of behavior that is acceptable. This is where you can go mentally, where you can go physically, all the codes and conventions. So that circle for ancient Egypt and for 21st century America, they're obviously very different, but it's the same circle. It's the same limiting factor. You're not supposed to go outside of it. These are thoughts, experiences, behavior you're not supposed to do. The sublime is what lies just outside that circle. The word sublime comes from on the threshold of. It's like, here's a door, and the sublime is literally at the threshold of the door. You're looking out into something else, right? And the quintessential sublime experience is a near-death experience. You're standing on the doorway, the threshold of death itself, right? And so in my book, I'm illustrating the different kinds of sublime experiences that you can have in relation to the cosmos, in the relation to thinking about being alive. Just being alive is the strangest sensation you could possibly have. I know that very personally after my stroke. I go into a chapter on childhood and how sublime your own childhood was. I go into animals, relation to animals. I have a chapter about the brain, a chapter about love. I'm working right now on a chapter about history, okay? But what I'm trying to say is the human brain is wired for these experiences, is wired for transcendental experiences that take us out of the narrow little realm that we live in. Because we're aware of our death as the only animal truly conscious of its own mortality, and it frightens the hell out of us. And the idea that we can see something larger than just the banal parts of our life is a doorway that allows us to kind of transcend the moment, to feel connected to something larger, to feel connected to some power in the cosmos, to evolution itself, right? And so we're wired for that. And I'm writing a chapter now about 40,000 years ago, at the moment where I think the sublime was born, is a story that I'm trying to illustrate right now with our upper Paleolithic ancestors. So it's deep inside of us. We need it. We have to have it. In the 21st century, we have very few avenues for it, any real avenues. Religion used to be the main kind of way of accessing this. And so, because it's so deep, we reach for false forms of the sublime that give us the sense that we're transcending, but it's not at all, because sublime has to come from within. It's an experience that you have, that you're generating in your own mind, in your own experience. The false sublime comes from outside. It comes from drugs. It comes from alcohol. It comes from shopping. It comes from online rage. It comes from joining a cause and just getting out all your aggression and violence, right? It comes from causes. It comes from addictions, okay? It gives you a sense, it calms you down and makes you feel like there's something else going on in life besides your job that you're sick of. But it's not real, it's not lasting, it's false, it's an illusion, it's not based on anything real. It's not connecting to that deep part of human nature that's wired for these experiences. So what happens is you have to have more and more and more and more of it. You have to have, more of this rush. You need more of the drug, you need more of the alcohol, you need more of the sex, you need more of the porn. It's never going to satisfy you. But the real sublime, you don't have that feeling. It's like, it's transformative. Once you feel it, it lasts for you for the rest of your life. It's what Maslow, again, called a peak experience. So that's the difference between the false and the real sublime. I haven't quite connected it to what you were saying, but if I think about it, I think you're on something very interesting.
I mean, maybe the connection I was trying to draw was doesn't hold, but yeah, for me, those early experiences of seeing things that just delighted me in a way that felt like that not only is, well, the thought process was a long time ago when something like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this exists. This is so cool. This is the coolest thing. And so clearly create an activation state within me. But then there was also a thought and a feeling of, again, a lot of this is sort of pre-verbal. It's not truly pre-verbal. I could speak at that age, but it was, that's of me and I'm of it, right? There's a connection there. And then it was, there's something to do about this. The activation state created in the body was, I need to learn more about this. I need to tell people about this. I need to think about this. I need more examples of this and see whether or not they're all like this, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly it meets some of the criteria of a sublime experience.
Definitely.
And I knew, again, when I was in graduate school and again when I was this young professor about to transition to tenure, that I knew it was going to do something different. It was as if I was on the threshold of something, but I didn't know what that next thing was. But I could trust it because of that early experience of knowing that's the thread. Like I'm an amphibian. This is my environment.
Yeah.
And you're an amphibian too, right?
Yeah.
And we're different amphibians, but we're going to be amphibians together.
Right.
And there's a permanence to it. It does seem to transcend time. I'm obsessed with time perception, so I have to be careful not to go off on a tangent about that.
Too.
But the human brain's ability to fine slice or macro slice time is incredible. And it's been said of not just addictions, but also interactions with toxic people that they murder time, that humans have I think it was Jung, I'll look it up, but one of the great psychologists said something to the extent that addictive behaviors, thought patterns, substances are humans' attempts to murder time so that they don't have to address their mortality.
Yeah.
And that's always made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, we say kill time is our expression.
Kill time through passive engagement, but also kill time through trying to get overwhelmed or overtaken by an experience or a substance.
As opposed to when you're truly connected, you have that sense of flow, and 3 hours can pass by and you're not even aware of it. So time is a totally subjective experience. It can be extremely slow and tedious and you feel very depressed, or it can pass by, but it passes by without you even noticing it, and it's a wondrous experience, When I'm deep in my writing, I'm not aware of the time passing. I'm so involved, I'm so immersed. It's a deeply, deeply pleasurable experience of time. It is sublime. And so I agree with you. I think your distinction is very interesting.
I'm eagerly awaiting your next book, but we won't rush you.
Well, I'm so immersed in it that I could talk for hours, because I also have a chapter in there about what I call the daemon, which is like that voice inside of you that speaks to you. And I'm writing a whole chapter about how sublime that is when you connect to that voice. So you are spot on. There is something very much connected to mastery in this book, but it's the next chapter that I'm writing.
Fantastic. I can't wait. I can't wait. I'd like to shift slightly to a topic that you've written extensively about, which is power. And not just power, but also seduction, which you've written extensively about. And of course, you've written about finding one's purpose. So tell me if the framework that I've just given myself liberty to create is an accurate one. And if it's not, I'm hoping that it's not in perhaps some interesting ways. So to me, you talk about, and we will talk about, power as a resource. It's something that it's there as a resource. It could be used or not used. And I think of seduction as one form of exchange between an individual. So there's a verb associated with seduction. Power, I'm thinking of more as a noun in this context. You're the word guy. And then, purpose is really about finding like to what end or ends one is going to devote power, seduction, and the other forces that allow human beings to interact with each other in the world. But power as a resource that can be expressed in different ways and accessed in different ways. Maybe we could just explore that a little bit, because, when we hear the word power, I think a lot of people kind of brace themselves, like, here we go, someone's going to try and have power over me. This is about manipulation, and so on and so forth. But I learned pretty early on that every career endeavor, there are power dynamics. There's mentor-mentee. There are teachers and their students, and both have power. In romantic relationships, there's a power exchange. There are yeses and there are nos. There are maybes. There are covert and overt contracts.
Yeah.
I'll do this because I want to.
Right.
You'll do this because you want to. Great. Sounds great. Overt contract. There are also covert contracts. Well, I don't feel safe doing that. So what I'll do is I'll take something from the interaction that you're not aware of, so that I can sort of ease my sense of danger and give myself the illusion of feeling safe, and all sorts of kind of complicated human dynamics that have to do with us having this forebrain thing that can do all of that gymnastics. So maybe we could start very simply by just saying, how would you define power in terms of its functional definition, like in interpersonal relations? And then why do you think power is so essential to all relationships? That's really what I'd like to get to. Why is it so essential? Why couldn't it be something else?
Well, the way I define power is I try and take it away from that kind of negative context that most people have and that you brought up. And I bring it to something very primitive and very primal. The way the human being is wired, the feeling that we have no control over our environment. And in the earliest period, it was literally over our environment and wild animals and nature and the climate, etc. But now the sense that you have no control over your career, over your children, over your parents is deeply, deeply immiserating. And it compels us to act in certain ways, either attempts to find positive ways of power or doing what you call covert ways of getting power, passive-aggressive. Traditionally, passive-aggressive means. So it's deeply wired in us to want a degree of control over the immediate environment and immediate events. We can never have complete control, and the idea of having complete control is nonsense, and it would actually be very ugly, because you want a degree of letting go and letting circumstances come to you, et cetera, et cetera. So the sense of you want to feel like, with other people and relationships, that you can influence them, that you can move them in a certain direction, either to get you to love you and treat you better, or either to stop annoying, irritating behaviors, or either to, wake up and find and do productive activity if it's your children, etc. You want to have the ability to influence people, to move them in a certain direction, either in your interest or in their interest, right? And once you have that need, and every single human being who's ever lived has that need, and we often don't recognize it because we're embarrassed by it. We're embarrassed by our desire for power, for our need to control. Every human being has it, right? And it's not easy because human beings are complicated. They don't, if you say, do this, and you're talking to your son, he'll do the opposite or he'll do something else. You can't just force people in a direction, right? By being overt and telling them this is what you need to do, you create resentment, you create an enemy. They may say, yes, yes, daddy, yes, husband, I'll do what you say, but they're going to resist you deep down inside, right? So people are tricky. They wear masks. They pretend to say one thing and they do another. They have their egos, and you inadvertently wound their egos or trip them in some way, and they react in a way that you don't expect. And so power is this kind of invisible realm that envelops society where people are continually battling each other and struggling in it, but no one is like talking about it. No one's being overt about it. No one's saying, this is exactly what I'm trying to do. And so when you enter the social world and the career world, you're not expecting these battles. You don't know, no one's taught you, no one's trained you. Your parents don't train you. Nobody trains you. And you make mistakes, and you realize how political people are. If you're a sharky character, and there's a certain percentage of them, you realize, wow, I can deceive people, I can manipulate them, I can get what I want, I can pretend to love them, and they'll fall for me, and I can do all this other stuff. But for most of us, the 95% of us who aren't sharks, and I'm including myself in that category, it's very, very disturbing to suddenly enter that world and see all of that invisible power games on that no one's given you any advice for or helped you. And so take it out of the realm of it's just about trying to dominate the world and manipulate and exploit and abuse. It's something inside of you. You have this need, and your suppression of it will only make you come out in passive ways, and you won't be able to control certain things. If you want to move people, if you want them to follow your ideas, if you want them to be more aligned with your politics or your ideas, you have to be subtle. You have to learn psychology. You have to learn certain aspects of how to almost move people without them realizing in certain directions, which is like the art of seduction. And if you're not interested in that, if you're just going to tell people what you think and what you're going to do, that means you're not interested in practical action. You're not interested in results. You're just interested in venting your own frustrations or your own anger. So learning the subtle little dynamics of power is extremely essential because we're a social animal. It doesn't mean that you're going to get dirty, that you're going to suddenly go